So, you want high-speed wireless internet, do you? I want it all! Premium television and satellite capability? I want it all! Anytime nationwide calling plan? I want it all! All in one plasma monitor? And I want it now! You got it! Introducing the latest in electronic entertainment. Vision View's lifestyle entertainment system is the result of cutting-edge technology, making it the first of its kind. We believe the all-in-one LES is sure to fit your life and your style.
We are entering into a 4-week conversation on one of the most life-relevant topics in any church in the United States of America this year. I trust that you will make it a priority to be at all 4 of these sessions because each one builds on the previous, and to have the full appreciation for what God's trying to say to us, we need to gain that progressive understanding. And we're kicking off this idea because the fact of the matter is, as Americans, whether we realize it or not, whether we like it or not, whether we intend for it to happen or not, we are consumed. All of us are constantly bombarded with alluring promises of savvy marketers and easy credit. We're offered beauty and significance and security and happiness, all for one low monthly credit payment. But the problem is, even after we achieve all of that, there's something inside of us that is still unsatisfied. And so we accumulate more and more and more till we fill the void that's been left. And then when that buzz wears off in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, we feel like we still don't have enough. The video you just watched is actually a homemade ripoff of a video of a commercial about 10 years ago from Chase Bank. Chase Bank actually did a commercial that used that same idea with the same song by Queen. Don't you guys just love Queen? Bohemian Rhapsody? Okay. And you got all that going on, and it showed a guy trying to buy the latest, greatest plasma television, and while he sat there on his phone, going into his Chase account, checking his credit score to see how much television he could buy on credit. See, what happens is, even in American culture, this stuff gets ingrained in us, without us even being consciously aware. How many of you know how to ride a bicycle? How many of you learned to ride that bicycle when you were like elementary age? How many have heard the phrase that it's as easy as riding a bicycle? Once you learn, you never... Well, watch this video and see if we can't challenge that thinking just a little.
Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome back to Smarter Every Day. You've heard people say it's just like riding a bike, meaning it's really easy and you can't forget how to do it, right? But I did something. I did something that damaged my mind. It happened on the streets of Amsterdam, and I got really scared, honestly. I can't ride a bike like you can anymore. Before I show you the video of what happened, I need to tell you the backstory. Like many 6-year-olds with a MacGyver mullet, I learned how to ride a bike when I was really young. I had learned a life skill and I was really proud of it. Everything changed though when my friend Barney called me 25 years later. Where I work, the welders are geniuses and they like to play jokes on the engineers. He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left. I thought this would be easy, so I hopped on the bike ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Destin Sandlin. First attempt riding the bicycle.
All right. So the faster I go, the better. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation. My thinking was in a rut. This bike revealed a very deep truth to me. I had the knowledge of how to operate the bike, but I did not have the understanding. Therefore, knowledge is not understanding. Look, I know what you're probably thinking. Destin's probably just an uncoordinated engineer and can't do it. But that's not the case at all. The algorithm that's associated with riding a bike in your brain is just that complicated.
Destin goes on to explain that it took him 8 months of riding that bicycle that way, at least 10 minutes, 7 days a week for 8 months, to unlearn how he used to ride a bike and to learn a new way of riding the bike. I share that to say this. In our everyday lives, we have habits and practices that are so ingrained in us regarding our need and our desire for things, that in order for us to change, we have to unlearn all the things we know about our spending patterns and behavior in order to learn a new way. And as much as any of us in this room might like to change, it doesn't happen overnight. So what we have to do is we have to stick to it. We have to keep going after it. We have to develop new habits and new ways of thinking and new commitments and priorities. And we have to learn them out. And in that, we develop a process of change. According to Dave Ramsey, anybody hear from Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University? Dave Ramsey says 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And the byproduct of that is not just the financial stuff that is so obvious, but it causes enormous stress and anxiety in their lives. 40 million Americans suffer from a sort of anxiety disorder that is that's called generalized anxiety disorder. It is a chronic, exaggerated worrying about everyday life. And the number one issue that Americans are worried about in chronic anxiety disorder, anybody want to give me a guess? Money. Money is also the number one issue of fights between couples and the second leading cause of divorce behind infidelity. The larger the debt, the greater the chance couples fight about money. 2/3 of all marriages, check this out, 2/3, 67% of all American marriages start out with the couple already in deep debt. Much of that debt is caused by our unquenchable desire for stuff, new stuff, fresh stuff, unheard of stuff, and the lack of contentment with what we already have. And I think this is actually very timely this morning because we're just coming off of the holidays, right? Some of us got stuffed. Raise your hand if you got stuffed. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just saying that it is. And some of the gifts that we bought and received for Christmas have already lost their luster. The kids have already stopped playing with them. Some of the things have been put on a shelf. Some of them we're bored with, out of sight, out of mind. Some of them have already been broken. Some of them we've already returned. We go to the store the day after Christmas to find out if the other stuff that we wanted before Christmas is on sale for 50% off so we can buy it because we didn't do enough shopping between Black Friday and Christmas Eve. And then here's what we do. We anxiously go to the mailbox every day, waiting on that blue and gold bill to come in. That gives us the reality of our obsession with stuff. And when we talk about being consumed with consumerism, we're really talking about what we value. This series is actually going to call us to evaluate the values that we build our lives around. Are we chasing after what really matters? We have the video that chase about this, and I want it all, and yet we sang the song, I'm chasing after you. We have to choose what we're going to spend our lives chasing after in life. So today we're going to take a realistic look at how all of us, in one way or another, are consumed by consumerism. I'm fired up and I'm ready. Are you ready? Yeah. Let's do this. Okay. We'll start out number one, right there in your outline. If you don't have it out, pull it out. Answer the question, what is consumerism? Consumerism is the belief that it is good for people to spend a lot of money on goods and services. See, consumerism isn't merely an economic theory. It is a social and behavioral value system. There's an author by the name of, I can't even pronounce his name, but he's the professor of international relations at George Washington University. And he wrote an article called The Crisis of American Consumerism. And here's what he said. In this article, he said, consumerism is the obsession with the acquisition that has become the organizing principle of American life. He goes on to call it a social disease, and then he says, a culture in which the urge to consume dominates the psychology of the citizens is a culture in which people will do almost anything to acquire the means to consume. They'll work slavish hours. They'll behave rapaciously in their business pursuits. They'll even bend the rules in order to maximize their earnings. They will also buy homes beyond their means and think nothing of running up credit card debt. It is therefore seems safe to say that consumerism is, as much as anything else, responsible for America's economic mess. Benjamin Barber went on to write a book literally called Consume. And here's what he wrote. Consumerism needs you and me to buy things way beyond the scope of our needs and even our wants. Because we are no longer a country that is manufacturing goods to meet real needs and human wants. We're now a country that manufactures the needs to sell us all the goods that it's got to produce. Researchers go on to talk about the effect of what's called the emerging adult, the emerging culture, college age 18 to 24, who think that they're so different and anti-consumeristic. But a recent study among college students showed that 91% of them are just as happy with their current level of consumerism as is their parents. In one way or another, every one of us is consumed by consumerism. This belief that it is good for people to spend a lot of money on goods and services. This obsession with acquisition. And here's the interesting thing. Consumerism also has kind of what we might call a religious bent to it. How many of you have heard the phrase brand loyalty? Like you use the same insurance you've used for years, Nationwide, State Farm, Progressive, whatever. You buy the same deodorant, you buy the same toothpaste, all of that stuff. Well, a recent study of modern super brands, things like Facebook and Google and Apple, researchers analyzed the brain activity that goes on in all of that, and they found out that a good bit of America are members of the Apple cult. They discovered that Apple products trigger the same bits of their brain as religious imagery triggers for a person sitting in a church service. This is your brain on Apple. It looks like this. And then here comes Jesus. Walking into the 21st century, walking into Shepherd Junior High School, walking into my life and yours, sitting down in Connect Church. Here comes Jesus with a completely different vision for our lives. A completely different value system, kind of like riding the bicycle, not necessarily backwards, but whatever that's called. And Jesus calls into question this notion that it is good for people to spend tons of money on goods and services. So if this is what consumerism is, how do I recognize consumerism in my life, in your life? Jesus walks into this room this morning, and Jesus would say these words. If you pop up the scripture from Luke, one to the next slide. He says, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" And then Jesus said to them, "Watch out and be on your guard against all kinds of greed." In your worship folder, underline that phrase. We're going to come back to it. Against all kinds of greed, because life, this is a really, really important line. We should have put this in red. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Keep going for me, please. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And he thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." And then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." See, this passage is actually set within the larger context of Jesus talking about what it means to be one of his followers, to be a disciple. And Jesus is teaching the crowd about personal discipleship, and then someone in the crowd kind of yells out, "Hey, teacher, rabbi, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." And in that moment, Jesus does the thing that he so commonly does. Rather than get sucked into a family argument about something that is not all that important to him, Jesus actually takes the conversation a little bit deeper. He kind of goes underneath the surface of what's really going on in the hearts and the minds of the listeners sitting out there. And as he does this, Jesus exposes some things about consumerism I think are very, very life relevant to you and me today. Here's one of those things. It's listed as A there in your outline. Consumerism, Jesus would say, is an issue of the heart. See, it's interesting that Jesus refused to get sucked into the argument. He says, "I'm not your arbiter." And the questioner calls Jesus teacher or rabbi because back then in Jewish culture, these matters were typically settled by a rabbi. A family would come, a rabbi would use his wisdom, he would pray about it, and then say, here's what you should do, and they kind of did that. We should go back to biblical times. That's what we ought to do. But Jesus refuses to take sides. Instead, Jesus goes to the heart of the matter. See, Jesus knows their quarrel is about something far deeper than who's going to get the family stuff. It's an issue of the heart. In fact, Jesus pointed out that issue. Jesus literally said it's an issue of greed. Then Jesus exposes it, and he says, beware and be on your guard against every form of, talk to me, greed. Jesus wants us to see what's really going on the inside. So he calls into question the purpose or the meaning of what it is they're trying to identify. And they bring these things up. Now here's what's interesting. As I think about this, and I think about the course of my life as a pastor, here's what I have come to understand in ministry. If I announce that I'm doing a message on sex or marriage or something like that, we'll have a pretty good attendance. Maybe even people would invite some friends. If I announce that I'm going to do a talk on finances or tithing, attendance tends to go down a little bit. And then I thought, well, what does that look like in the days that aren't Sundays in the life of a pastor? And I was thinking about this and doing some reading, and it occurred to me that throughout these years in ministry, I have had countless numbers of people sit across from me in a Starbucks or the church office or a lobby somewhere and say, David, I'm struggling with, David would say maybe something about their marriage. Or David, I'm struggling with a certain type of addiction, maybe whether it's alcohol or drugs or a sexual addiction. They would talk about all those kinds of things. And I've heard almost everything. You say, David, why do you say you've heard almost everything? You know what I've never, ever heard in almost 30 years now of vocational ministry? I've never had a single person sit in front of me and say, David, you know what I struggle with? I struggle with greed. Tim Keller, in his book, The Counterfeit God, says this. He said, greed's modus operandi includes blindness to your own heart, because greed hides itself from the victim. And Jesus warns people far more often about greed than he does about sex. And yet almost no one in this room thinks they are guilty of it. See, our greed, our obsession with acquisition, our consumerism, is an issue of the heart. And we are all in one way or another influenced by consumerism. Now here's why this hits so close to home for us. We don't often look at it this way, but it hits home for us because we think self-worth equals net worth. We attach our self-worth in American culture to our net worth. My friend Dennis Anderson said it like this. He said, the sum of what we have, we think that the sum of what we have is the sum of what we are. Dennis goes on to quote a book called The Theory of Leisure Class, and the author writes these words: material goods define who we are and where we stand in the social class. The consumption of socially visible material goods to convey socioeconomic status has been in place for thousands of years. Here's what that means to you and me here this morning in a very, very practical, one-sentence one-off. It's not on the screen. You might want to write it down. The idea of what I have starts in my heart. The idea that I am what I have starts in my heart. It's an issue of the heart, folks. Which leads to my second thought. Consumerism focuses us on ourselves. As Jesus continues this very teachable moment, he tells a parable about a rich man who has harvested this huge crop and he doesn't know what to do. He's going to tear down his barns. Remember the story we just read a moment ago? And here's what I don't know if you picked up on. Notice that the man in that story did not acquire the harvest and his wealth immorally. He worked for it. He earned it, right? See, Jesus is not saying, nor does Jesus ever say, that it's bad or immoral to have lots of things or to even have nice things. The Bible never says that. But what Jesus is highlighting in this story for that particular audience is that when our hearts are consumed with consumerism and greed, the real problem is we focus on ourselves. It's very interesting if you were to go back and look through verses 17 and 18, all the times that the person in that story uses the words I and me. He says, what shall I do since I have no place to store my crops? This is what I will do. I will tear down my barns, and I will build larger ones, and there I will store all my grains and all my goods. See, consumerism creates an inward focus instead of an upward and an outward focus. Nowhere does this rich landowner ever credit God with all of the harvest that he has benefited from. Nowhere is there an upward expression of gratitude, nor is there any source of outward expression of generosity or giving away the surplus to take care of those who are in need. It's about, I will do this because my barns can do this and I have earned this. And when you and I, in the same kind of way, are consumed with consumerism, it turns us inward. And here's the real danger. We're never really satisfied with what we have, and we always want more. The obsession with acquisition is an age-old problem. Listen, folks, this isn't a 21st century or a 20th century American problem. It is a global, universal, age-old problem. King Solomon, arguably the wisest man to ever live, said these words in the book of Ecclesiastes. Here's what Solomon said. He said, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who, talk to me, consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. Now, Solomon's not arguing that it's spiritual and great to be poor and it's unspiritual to be wealthy. That's not what he's saying. In the context of that conversation, he's talking about the heart issue of greed, the pursuit of more. Getting more and more and more and more takes us further inward where we become consumed by what we have or what we do not have. Consumerism focuses us on ourselves. Listen to this. I did a little research study this week. And here's what I learned about the average American home. Not the wealthiest home, not the poorest home. Homes like yours and mine. In the average American home, there are 300,000 items sitting in our homes. Over our lifetime, we will spend 153 days looking for things that we have lost. Apparently I hit a nerve, right? Here's a cool one. 1 out of every 10 Americans rents off-site storage. As a matter of fact, the fastest growing segment in commercial real estate, storage facilities. You're looking for an investment with some of your money? Storage facilities. The average, check this out. How many of you have children or grandchildren? How many of you gave them something for Christmas? Check this out. This is going to discourage you. The average 10-year-old owns 238 toys and plays with 12. The average American woman owns 30 outfits, one for every day of the month. The average American man owns 12 fishing rods, one for every month. Check this one out. Check this one out. In the average American home, we spend $1,700 on clothes annually, but we throw away 65 pounds of clothes each year. The Wall Street Journal said this. They said we spend $1.2 trillion every year on items we don't need. And yet we still have this ongoing appetite for more. Leads me to the third thing there, letter C. Consumerism invests in wrong things. See, there's one thing here very specifically that Jesus exposes about this idea of consumerism. We find the rich man hoarding his plenty in those new barns and storehouses, but investing in the wrong thing. He assumes that this life is all there is. He assumes that this life is all that matters. And if you look and reflect on that story in light of what we just shared about Americans, here's what matters most to this man. Harvesting a large crop, building bigger barns, achieving greater financial security, what he gets to eat, what he gets to drink, the kind of entertainment he gets to have, and at the end, remember not to die. Now, he can't control the last one. But Jesus tells us that that very night, this man, the man that chose to sit back, the man that chose to relax, the man that chose to focus his entire life inward on the here and now, the man that wanted to eat, drink, and be merry, and have this security all hoarded up, what happens that night? He dies. So who gets all the stuff that's been accumulated? One author said this: the executive who works from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. will be both highly successful and fondly remembered by his spouse's next spouse. Folks, he can't take it with him, right? He invested in the wrong things. See, that's where Jesus is going with this whole story. Not about what the man had, but what the man did with what he had. Jesus said, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich toward God. See, when we're consumed with things that don't really matter, we easily lose sight of the things that really do matter. If the book of Matthew is being written today, in chapter 6, as it relates to this conversation, it'd be written like this. Back one more. Here we go. Don't let the marketers suck you into thinking that you must have all they are advertising to you. Invest not in things that you have planned obsolescence and that feed your discontent for what you already have. Rather, invest in things that have eternal significance, that don't go obsolete, and you won't feel the need to replace it when the newest model comes out. That's the 21st Century Harris translation. Available on Amazon. No. See, here's the deal. Consumerism is an issue of the heart. It focuses on ourselves. It invests in the wrong things. So let's get really, really personal this morning as we start driving this home. Question number 3 is this. Thinking about you and me, how do I overcome consumerism? But before I answer that question, there's one of the things that you must know absolutely, indisputably, to be accurate, and it's this. Consumerism can never be removed. It can only be replaced. It can't be removed. It can only be replaced. Now here's the question we have to personally ask ourselves. How am I, how is David, how is Ron, how is Ginger, how is Sherry, how is Juan, how is Robert, how is Bill, how is Bob, how is Samantha, how is Sarah? Consumed by consumerism. Because none of us is immune. We've learned to go through life in a certain way. So here it is. Consumerism isn't just something that is out there in our American culture. Hear me this morning. Hear me. It's something that's right here in this room, in our families, right here in our hearts. And only you can evaluate your values when it comes to the issue of money and possessions. In fact, here's what I'd like you to do this week. I would like you to take a little bit of time and really evaluate yourself and find out just how much your heart is tied up in stuff. Because if we're really honest, most of us don't think that we're consumed with consumerism. And perhaps, as Tim Keller pointed out, when we don't think we're consumed by consumerism, perhaps we're the most vulnerable to consumerism. Because it's a blind spot. How much of our time and our energy are spent thinking about what we're going to buy next or taking care of the stuff that we already have? Having stuff, hear me, don't misquote me. Having stuff, if you're watching online, isn't necessarily wrong. That's not the point. But when it comes to consumerism, it's all about our idea about how much we want more and more and how it consumes our time and our energy and our emotions, and the stuff becomes an obsession, and we have to acquire more and more to get the fix, and then it becomes an obstacle to pursuing what really matters. So let me give you real quickly 3 very practical suggestions that you can take home with yourself on how to deal with this if you think it might be an issue in your life. First suggestion is this: decrease my awareness of things that I don't have or don't need. If I'm talking to someone who struggles with alcohol and they're starting to make some progress, you know one of the things that an alcoholic doesn't do? Alcoholic doesn't go meet his friends in a bar. Why? The temptation is obvious, right? If I'm talking to someone who is struggling with a sexual addiction, people who struggle with sexual addictions don't go to certain websites. And in the same kind of way, if we are going to overcome this need, kind of like someone who deals with overeating doesn't go into a cupcake shop. The same kind of way, don't go wandering through stores just because. Don't go to certain websites. Stay off of Hotlook or Amazon or REI or eBay or Etsy. Don't go to the Barrett Car Show. Don't drive around on Saturday mornings just in case somebody in your neighborhood's having a garage sale. There's a reason they're getting rid of it. Stop exposing yourself to environments that are going to raise your internal level of discontent with what you already have. It's really not rocket science. So on one hand, you have to decrease the awareness of things that you don't have. On the other hand, this is the next thing, increase my awareness of things that others don't have but might need. And if you're going to spend some time surfing the web, why not do a little bit for good? Why don't you read through some of the stories on websites like Feed My Starving Children or Compassion International or Clean Water? Get in touch with people who do need food and clothes. Expose yourself to the needs of others. You know, even if it's a very small scale, every week sitting outside these doors, there's a box. You can bring in peanut butter or cereal or something very basic like that we take to New Hope Community Center right here in Mesa. But I want you to take some time this week. Some time to yourself, some time with your spouse. You want to act, you know how they talk about in families that deal with spousal abuse or physical abuse or certain addictions that somebody has to break the family cycle? Spend some time with your kids this week, talking to them about the cycle that you've allowed yourself to get into and how it's unhealthy. Ruthlessly evaluate the values that you're passing on to your children. Look at your budget. Look at your bank statement. Pull out those December credit card bills that are just coming in January. Take some time and look around your home. Look in your closet, your garage, and your cupboards. For most of us, it won't take too long to realize that we are in one way or another consumed with consumerism. I did this week. I'm a little bit embarrassed to tell you this, but I'm going to anyway. I'm pretty fortunate. My wife and I are not, by anybody's stretch of the imagination, wealthy people. We have no debt. We make reasonable income. We have no debt other than a reasonable mortgage. We have reasonable income. We are God-centered folks. We do our very best to make God the center of all of our decisions through all of our lives. We're generous people. Not bragging, I'm just laying the framework for something. We're generous to this church. We're generous to a couple of other faith-based charities that we believe in. We're generous to some things in this community. We're generous to some people we know in our neighborhood. But I'm putting this series together with all of the 3 of those things going pretty well. I decided to see if I was struggling with consumerism. So I walked in my closet. I'm not allowed in Tammy's. there's no room for me anyway. Here's what I found. Just in a cursory look in my closet. I actually like hoodies. Like this week or 10 days of cold weather's not bothering me. I got sweaters and hoodies I haven't worn since I moved to Arizona. But I found that I've got 3 hoodies that to the naked eye look the same. They're a different fabric, but basically the same look. That if I wore them to meetings that you were a part of 3 consecutive days, you would think I had worn the same one every day. And then I looked and I've got right underneath those hoodies in a different rack, I've got 3 kind of pullover shirts. They're all gray. They look about the same. If I were in a meeting with you and wore each one of those each day, you'd think I wore the same one each day. I have 3 black sweaters. They look about the same. If I were in a meeting with you for 3 consecutive days and wore a different one each day, you'd think I wore the same one each day. This was a 4-week series. I ruthlessly evaluated my life according to each of the things that I'm teaching throughout this 4 weeks. If I got a 75 on a test and an exam in school, my parents would discipline me. As your pastor, I'm getting a 75. I didn't realize the truth of this conversation we're having this morning, that subtly, in ways I never realized, never even thought about, consumerism had entered into my life. I have no debt. I'm financially generous. I attempt to live a God-centered life. And yet somehow, without me even realizing this has happened, this spirit of consumerism had slipped into my life. I did, in preparation for this conversation this morning, because I wanted to be authentic with you, what I'm asking you to go home and do this afternoon or before you come back next Sunday. And folks, take some time this week to talk about that with your friends. As a matter of fact, I'm going to encourage you to be in a connection group. As we go through this 4 weeks, yesterday I met with all of our connection group leaders. We pulled out the curriculum. It is pre-printed in a booklet similar to Unleashing Hope. Every week is in here. All the questions are in here. I'm going to ask you to be in a connection group. For those of you who are already in a connection group and you know which one you're going to go to, your group leaders have enough of these for everyone. If you're relatively new here today, you're thinking about being in a group, or maybe you don't know if you want to be in a group, but you want to see what this is like. There's a table right outside the doors on your way back out to your car. You can pick up one of these guides. We have some of them out there too. You can look at the questions and look at the extra scriptures that have been researched and prepared. If you're not sure about being in a group, pull out, everybody have your worship folder, hold it up so I can see, make sure we're all talking the same language. Okay, good. Open your worship folder. And on the inside page, there is a list of a dozen connection groups, multiple dates and times that you can be a part of during this 4 weeks. It might be that you're a little bit anxious about this, but you're sitting by someone who's going to go. If you're going to go to one, elbow the person next to them just so they know. CJ, that was an idiot test, you failed. Find one that fits your schedule. Here's the deal. Here's why this is so important. Kind of like this crept into my life. I was fortunate enough to catch it before I believe it became a problem. But some of you already know it's a problem in your life. Some of you are already dealing with this debt. You're not getting a 75% on this exam. You're getting a 25%. Or maybe a 0. Satan wants to isolate you and make you feel like you're the only one. Now, you may sit in one of these groups for the first week, maybe the first 2 weeks, and never say a word. What you're going to hear, I learned yesterday in that meeting, is you are going to hear from seasoned, godly leaders who have your best interests at heart, who are going to facilitate the conversations that are already prepared for you in this booklet. They're going to come in prepared. They're going to come in having prayed for you. They're going to come in having listened to this message and taken notes like you are and prepared to facilitate the conversation. Because, folks, you have to have this conversation with your family. It's helpful if you can have it with friends, especially in a safe environment. You really need to help your children understand what it means about in American culture. They can easily become consumed by consumerism, and somebody has to break the cycle of addiction. I want to talk about this in our small groups and our connection groups. Because if we don't take time to evaluate our personal internal value systems, we will never change. And we'll just keep on riding the bike the same old way. We'll never see that there's another way that we can live free from consumerism and the obsession of the acquisition process. And we'll never know that there's another way to chase what really does matter. Remember a few minutes ago when I started this conversation, I quoted an author whose name I couldn't really pronounce, so I didn't even try. I'll take you back to something he said. He went on to say these words: "Consumerism will not just magically disappear from its central place in our culture. It has to be supplanted by something else. So what should replace the worship of consumer goods?" I think that's a pretty profound question by an American college professor. What he's really saying is you can't get rid of an itch by becoming a good scratcher, right? Whatever is creating the itch has to be replaced, because that's the way that all idols work. They can't be removed, they have to be replaced. So when your life, knowingly or unknowingly, becomes defined by what you have or by what you don't have, and then you suddenly realize that you're not supposed to, nor will you ever be able to find your ultimate satisfaction, meaning, purpose, where do you go? Last thing there in your outline, and we're done. Be rich toward God. Now that's not a catch. I'm not after your money this morning. Hear me out. Be rich toward God. We go to the one who told us that our lives aren't defined by our possessions. We go to Jesus. I have a pastor, his name's Matt Boyle. Matt Boyle said last summer in a message I heard him do, he said, "Run as fast as you can after Jesus." See, we go to the one who humbled and emptied himself to come down to this world to save us from ourselves. We go to the one who gave up the riches of heaven and became poor so that we might become spiritually rich through a relationship with him. We go to the one who gave up his life so that we might become his treasure and so that he might become our treasure. We go to Jesus, and when we go to Jesus, we chase what really matters. Amen? And so, Father, we thank you. We thank you for your goodness. We thank you for the practicality of your word. God, you didn't just write these words that we're studying in these conversations on Sunday and the extra ones we're studying in our connection groups for Americans in the 21st century. This has been going on since the beginning of humankind. And we're still not getting it right. God, we can't change the whole world, but we can change ourselves. And it's a process, and as we saw with the bicycle example, sometimes it's an awkward or even difficult or trying process. The reality is we have to choose to persevere. We have to choose to change and then persevere through the awkwardness of the change. Before we dismiss, with your heads bowed, is there anybody here that would like to raise your hand and say, "David, this is important, and I need to get this right in my life and in my family's right"? Would you lift your hand up and back down? That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. God, you saw the hands. You know the hearts. It's not our intent to point anybody out or to make somebody feel awkward or embarrassed this morning. Holy Spirit, these folks raised their hands in response to my question, that in hope that you'll speak into their situation, in hope that you'll give them whatever strength, grace, courage, determination, perseverance that they need to chase after you, to chase what really matters. We love you, God. We thank you for all your goodness. We pray these things in Jesus' name. And everybody said, and folks, thanks for your time today. Enjoy your connection groups. Grab a guide outside. We'll see you next Sunday.